I want to lead us away from our movies and talk about a show.
Okay.
That we haven't talked about yet. Game of Thrones, bro. Game of Thrones. And this one I am very, 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 very passionate about. This is my favorite show, even above Star Wars, which I love, but this is my fucking thing.
Hell yeah.
I love Game of Thrones so fucking
too.
much, bro. So, and I bring all that up to kind of say, oh yeah, I love movies, but now I'm going to stab at my own statement because what was your thought? You've watched all the series,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
All the way through.
Yep.
What did you think about season 8?
Okay, so
there's a lot to unpack, but I want to see kind of where you're standing on it.
So I said that I love Star Wars because it's Star Wars. I love all Star Wars because it's Star Wars. I don't think I can say the same about Game of Thrones. I don't love all Game of Thrones. Season 8 was not that good.
Yeah, agreed.
And the way that I look at it, right? Like the basic tenets of storytelling. From the very first episode of season 1, this first scene in the show is used to show us how fucked up, how powerful, how unstoppable.
The very first episode.
The very first shot of the show is us seeing how gnarly, like, the Night King and the White Walkers are. And then to have that episode be something that you can't see because it was so fucking dark, be something that is so, like, 3 episodes building up to it, something that only lasts, that 8 seasons have been building up to, only to last 1 episode.
Yeah, that's irritating.
Like,
that's very irritating.
It's just not great storytelling.
Yeah, you're right. Like the very first episode, you get so caught up in so much of Game of Thrones that you do forget the very first shot is what George R.R. Martin planned this entire time was these White Walkers. It's going to be all this bullshit going on, but these White Walkers, bitches, pay attention. We're going to make it the first shot so you know we're there. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's exactly it. It's so much lead up for that season 8.
Yeah, so there's this thing in storytelling, this idea or theory or whatever you want to call it. It's called Chekhov's gun. So the idea is there's this old Russian guy named Chekhov who wrote some books. He's not important. What's important is what he said, right? So Chekhov's gun. It's this idea in storytelling that, like, the example is if you have a gun, like if you're writing a scene and you mention in your writing that there is a gun hanging above the fireplace, Chekhov says that gun has to go off. That gun has to fire before the end of the story. So if you mention something, it can't just be there for no reason.
Yeah.
And they use that in writing because you're choosing words. Anything that you find important enough to mention in your description of something has to be important in the long run.
Right.
That idea, I think, is even more important in filmmaking because you're not just choosing the words at this point. You're not just writing, there's a gun above the fireplace. If you are making a show, if you are filming something, you are showing people's eyes are on the gun above the fireplace.
Exactly.
It becomes even more important.
Right, exactly.
So I think that the White Walkers here, we failed Chekhov's gun, right? We had the White Walkers that were built up all season, and you could say that the gun went off, but it didn't really
go
off. Yeah, we shot a blank, right?
Yeah,
literally. Like it was not what it should have been. It did not live up to what it was built up to be. It didn't meet its potential. Right. And that's where I think it's not that it was just anticlimactic or a little boring. It was fundamentally flawed storytelling.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. As I feel like the storytelling was so much of the issue, and I think a lot of it has to do with, I don't think George R. R. Martin's released his book yet, but his last book is supposed to be a different ending of what the series is. Yeah. And I feel like they got a little bit ahead because it's funny we talk about D&D, but D&D from the show, our favorites, is, the biggest thing that really just drove me crazy is we spent so much time on Arya's storyline. So much time. You know, she's the what do you call it? No man with no face, or
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So I like that whole storyline was so much focus of what she could have been, this very killer assassin, which she showed a little bit of, but a lot of it was of her being able to take people's faces, which they really climaxed at when they show the season, not the red wedding, or was it the red wedding?
Well, I mean,
what's it called? When
after the red wedding, when she comes in and feeds.
Yeah, the phrase. But what, I can't remember what the episode that's called. But yeah, when that happened and she became Frey, was like, oh my, what just happened? This is insane. That was so much buildup. But then I think it was the season, during that season or the season after that, it disappeared. The whole storyline, a whole season of the pain and the misery and being blinded in the streets, trying to survive and fighting the other goddess with no, or goddess, but the other person with no, the other female with no face, just to see that ending with nothing. That's like the biggest disconnect I saw, is like you said, it's like a gun or whatever. Like, we're showing so much of this because obviously there's going to be a point of this in the end.
Yeah.
If she had an episode like she stopped by, something happened and she left, great. She spent so much time there to learn this trade to never use in the last couple of seasons.
Yeah. I think like I love Game of Thrones so much, but I think that once we got towards the end, I think they were just trying to do so much
in a short time.
Yeah. I think that season 8, if it had been, so it was what, 6 episodes long?
Mm-hmm.
I think even if it had been 12 episodes long, it could have been a lot better than it was.
Yeah.
Because they just introduced so much. Like, we didn't even mention Daenerys burning down King's Landing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we didn't mention that shift, that character development that she had.
The whole, 8 seasons. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, we didn't even touch on that yet. But I feel like that decision, that's one of the, I think, people's biggest problems with season 8 was that they said that was not Daenerys. That was not something that she would have done. It didn't match her character development. And I agree with that. I think it did feel a little forced or a little rushed. Mm-hmm. But I think if they had made that take a few more episodes, we could have seen her kind of leaning toward that. We could see that slow descent, even just across an extra 3 episodes.
And I think a lot of that could have been changed so quickly with just a little bit of better editing. And although Game of Thrones isn't the one to be like flashback, whatever the hell, I saw an edit on Twitter where somebody showed Daenerys and all the shit she's been through, the negative, right? Mm-hmm. She's been fighting and she's been fighting and she's been fighting, and then all the things that just kept happening, her getting, Khal Drogo and all that kind of stuff, all those negative things that happened to her. And someone put an edit where it showed her like kind of like that moment when she's about to make that decision, and then it like kind of like went into her head and it showed those clips of all the negative, and then you're like, oh, I understand what she's thinking.
Yeah.
And now she's like, instead of just showing her snap, and then you go and you're like, wait, what? It's like, what was she thinking? What was going on in her brain? Because we don't see any of that.
Yeah.
We see so much of her character and what's going on, but then that final snap, you don't see that. Which even that was still too much, like you said, a couple episodes to see it slowly progress like normal, like how Game of Thrones is Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Would have been fabulous. But just at least see that kind of why she made that decision literally out of the fucking blue, just because of she was angry. Like, are you kidding me? She's been angry so many times. And people are like, oh, well, because she's always showed psychopathic little elements of like when she burned the brothers, what's his name? The chubbier dude, my fiance's favorite character, Samuel Tarly.
Yeah.
And so like when she kills his brother and dad, like they're like, oh, wasn't that crazy? I'm like, yes, but there was a purpose for it, and she did it calmly.
Yeah.
She made the decision like, you have a choice. Those people at King's Landing didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
In fact, like she had the choice to be like, okay, like let's take this slow. No, let's just fucking murder them all. And like I love that you love that too, because it is Game of Thrones. Like if that happened with better build up and better storytelling, I would have hated it, obviously, for like personal reasons, but story writing, you'd be like, this is fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like that's why you love Game of Thrones, is everybody like the best time is when you show someone like, did your fiance watch with you live?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But later I showed my fiance, so I knew it was coming first season, and like after episode 10 on the first season, Ned gets beheaded, and she's like, I was like, yeah, get
Yeah.
used to that. You don't
Yeah.
even know, you know. But that first moment of just like, she's like, I hate it, but I love it. That
Yeah.
thrill, and you lost so much of it last season.
Yeah. Yeah. I think right. So we had two. I think Game of Thrones boils down to two main story arcs, right? We have the fight for this Iron Throne, and we have the White Walkers and the battle against the Night King. What season 8 did was handle them one at a time, which is so different from everything that had been happening the rest of the show.
Because it's been happening
From
simultaneously.
season 1, they'd all been building in tension at the same time. They'd all been happening like coexisting with one another. Those stories had been evolving and growing and progressing together. Even though they were almost two separate stories, they'd been combined and progressing at the same time, like they were one story. And when we got to season 8, instead of continuing with that trend that had been going on from season 1 of both of these growing at the same time, they handled them one at a time.
Right.
So the characters were all focused on the Night King, and then he died, and they were like, all right, cool, that's that.
Yeah.
Now let's go. Now let's go to King's Landing. So I think if they would have made those happen simultaneously, if maybe the
Instead of killing the White Walker third episode, made it maybe the sixth episode where everything is kind of the same time.
yeah. So the episode 3 hits. That's when the Night King died. When they had that battle at Winterfell, maybe Winterfell falls and they have to escape. The only place they can go is King's Landing.
Yeah.
They get to King's Landing. The White Walker army and the Nightwing shows up with his zombie dragon flying in the skies, and they're there with Cersei and the Mountain.
So it's finally all the characters for the first time ever. All the characters in the same.
All of it is together, and then they have to not only fight the White Walkers but also Cersei's forces.
So it's all three of them. Fucking.
Yeah, everything's happening at once, and then just like the show has been all along, we have everything happening at the same time in this epic conclusion. I think that would have been way cooler.
Yeah,
than,
I agree.
Than what we got.
I agree so much so, and it's like there's so many moments. I mean, the Battle of the Bastards, and like.
So good.
There's just so many moments of it that cinematically and mind-blowingly just it ripped me apart.
Yeah.
Like emotionally watching the show and these characters that you are so attached to on like different levels. Like I feel like you get to know a character, but in this like you're not knowing like who they are, but what they're thinking, what made them that way, what future things you think they will do based on their attitudes, and it's just you learn so much about them that I feel like you just fall in love with these characters so much. And it could be said with Hodor. I mean, that was the moment that it's not a show anymore, man. It's like I cried. I still cry. I cannot see it anymore without just feeling so powerful of that moment of what it represents in life and like we said, good and bad and so much of those things. And it's just like, so when it closed out, I was just very upset.